Good morning and welcome to today's lecture. This one is on Korea. So hopefully you have a set of notes. Looks something like this. If not, print that out and let's get started. So traditionally, Korea has been fairly close to China. In terms of culture, in terms of what Korea looks to as who are the people that we want to follow, China has always sort of been the big brother that we want to be. Someday, when we grow up, we'll do that. And so when Confucius does his thing in China, it eventually comes into and plays into Korea as well. And Confucianism is a very important part of Korean life. Okay, we're specifically looking now at this early modern period in Korea, and they have thoroughly adopted these Chinese ideas. They use Chinese letters for their language, even though it doesn't fit at all. And they use Confucianism. And there's an interesting story that kind of shows what the Korean mindset toward Confucianism is. And this is the story of Sim Chung. So Sim Chung was a girl, probably, late teens, somewhere around that. And she had a blind father. And she was incredibly loyal to her father. This is what we call filial piety. And in this story, which is one of 5 traditional Korean opera stories, Sim and her father are going along and they're going through life. Life is very hard for them. So her father actually goes by the name of Blind Sim. And she one day is praying and she is told by this vision that if you can get 10,000 bags of rice and offer them at this temple, then your father will be healed. And so Chung goes, oh, wow, all I have to do is get 10,000. So he goes out on the road. I mean, this is like a fortune of rice. She goes out on the road and she's trying to figure out how can I do this. And she meets this traveling salesman, merchant fellow. And he goes, oh, I've heard that there are some fishermen down there at the dock who are looking for someone to sacrifice to the god of the seas to, make their whole venture a little easier. And they're willing to pay 10,000 bags of rice for this. And she's like, oh, there's my chance. I'll just sell myself to be their sacrifice. And then the 10,000 bags of rice will be there and my father will get his sight back, even though, of course, I'll be dead. So she goes down and she sells herself to the fishermen. And they give the 10,000 bags of rice. And they take her out into sea and they throw her overboard. And the sea god says, oh, what a perfect example of filial piety. This is amazing. I can't let this poor person die. And so he saves her, and she, in some of the versions of the story, she becomes the queen of the sea and reigns underwater with him for such. Yeah, the time gets a little tricky to figure out. And anyway, one day, she is now back on land, and it's a long, long opera. We'll shorten things. And she is kind of like the princess of the area. And she still hasn't heard about what has happened to her father. And so one day she says, oh, you know what? We need to throw a feast for all of the blind men in the kingdom, and maybe I'll find my father. And so she and I guess now her husband, the prince, throw this big feast, and they invite all the blind people, and these blind people come in, and her father's not among them, and she's getting a little bummed. And the more blind people come in, then finally her father comes in and Xiang goes, "Oh, Dad, it's you!" And then they get this big lightning storm and all the blind people receive their sight and they live happily ever after. But the idea, yeah, I have a DVD of it in Korean. One guy yodeling and one person hitting a drum. But the point of this story is that you have this filial piety that the person is so willing that she would even sacrifice herself just to get her old father his sight back. And in the end, it all worked out because she was so willing to do that. So this is a little example of one of these deeply set ideals in the Korean mindset, in the Korean way of doing things, that one of their most famous stories is coming from this time period about this girl who's willing to die for her father's sight. And another characteristic of Korea at this time was isolationism. In that Korea looked at the outside world and was simply not interested. They had China. China was a pretty decent big brother. China wasn't interested in the rest of the outside world. And so why should Korea? Because after all, if we need anything, we've always got China over there. We can just snuggle up to them and they'll give us what we need. And so China at this point was very much shut off from the rest of the world and would stay this way for another couple hundred years before eventually they opened up. And you look at the 20th century and things totally changed, but we're not going to get that far in this one. So I would like to introduce you to a couple of fairly famous people. So what order are they in your notes here? So our first person that we're going to talk about is a fellow by the name of King Sejong. I have to make sure I spell his name right. And he invented this thing that we call Hangul. And let me make sure I spelled this one correctly. And the vowels are tricky. So King Sejong was kind of like the super king in this time period of Korea. And he looked around at his people, and Korean is not actually related to the other East Asian languages, not like Japan or Chinese. It actually comes originally from Central Asia and had migrated in. And the way that it was written was using Chinese characters. And they don't fit very well. They would use a Chinese character and then they would pronounce the Korean word to it, but since Korean is so different from Chinese that it was really difficult. And this was called Hanja. Which is writing Korean with Chinese letters. And in Hanja, you took forever to learn to read. It was only a very few of the most educated people that could actually learn how to read and write Korean. Because it would be like trying to speak English using only Chinese letters. And so you had to go through this huge amount of training, and it was a very limited thing. And King Sejong said, we need to think of something better. And very few alphabets in the world are invented. That someone says, I'm going to make a better alphabet. For example, let's look at the Latin alphabet. I think I'm going to bring you guys in closer to the board. All right, so in the English alphabet, for example, we all know this letter. Okay. This makes the sound ah. mostly. Yeah, English is really tricky when it comes to this. And this is actually modeled on an ox. It just so happens that the ancient Phoenicians, their letter for ox, a type of cow, started with the sound ah. And so they said, well, let's draw a cow. You know, there's his horns, there's his eyes, okay, kind of a funky cow. So they didn't do the eyes, but they put the cow and the horns. And then over time, the letter got turned around and shortened a notch, and it became this. This shape has absolutely nothing to do with the sound that it makes. Okay, so if we go to next letter, B, again, there's nothing about that shape that says it should be the sound B. But what Sejong did is he got together a bunch of the smartest people in his kingdom and said, you know what, guys, I don't think Korean needs to be written with these Chinese letters. I think we could do something better. So your assignment, you Hall of Worthies, he called them, is to go out and figure out what is the way that Korean should be written. Something easier, something that everybody could learn how to use. And so they go along and they come up with this idea of each sound in Korean. They counted, they said, oh, you know what? Korean doesn't actually have that many sounds. English actually has far more different sounds that we make than Korean. For example, English has 20-some vowel sounds, and we try to all write them in 5 vowel letters. And Korean, they said, you know what? We could actually get by with 20-some symbols because we have 20-some sounds. And so they said, but what symbol should we make? In Chinese, you know, this could be many different sounds. It could mean, you know, depending on what part of China you're from, it could be sounded this way or in this way. In Korean, we try to say it in a different way. It has nothing about that shape that makes it have to have that sound. So they began looking at the way that the mouth was shaped and that the people would make these sounds. Now, if you don't have these yet, you will need a few pieces of paper. So most important right now, you can print this on a smaller piece of paper, but I made it big so you can see it, is this one. This lists all of the Korean consonants as far as we're concerned. So this is the one that you need to have right now. And there's a similar one that lists the vowels. Vowels and the vowel combinations. Okay, so get these 2 pieces of paper. You should also have printed out our little story of Kim Sejong, or of King Sejong. Okay, it could be black and white. And this one is actually published by SIL. And this is a beautiful diagram of how the Hall of Worthies came up with these. And I'm going to kind of explain this to you, and you can use that one as a reference. So as they looked at this, they said, you know what? There are basically only 5 basic sort of sounds. So we have sounds that you make with the lips, where, like the letter M in English, you have the sound. Okay, now everybody together say Hey, no, like actually say it. So, your mouth makes this shape. Think of what looking front on. Your mouth makes They said, well, that is, okay, here's a lip sound. And we will have it be an M. My handwriting is terrible, those of you who actually know Korean. So this is an M. Basically, the shape of your mouth. There is a lip sound. There is the tongue sound. So if you say your tongue is now moving up and touching the tip of your teeth. the back of your teeth. Mm. And so if you stand, actually in this case we have to stand this way, your tongue will actually do that. Okay, no, I should stand this way. So you're looking at the side view of the face, and the tongue does this in your mouth to make the N. Okay. Then we have the tooth sound. I should write the Latin letter beside it. And if you make a S sound, your tongue presses up against the teeth, and in the middle you have this sort of a little rise. It's making this little hump, and it's coming in, and so let's make this sound look like this. All right, then you have a cheek sound. But in order to make a cheek sound, you have to have a little air. These are all ones that you make without blowing air. And so we'll skip that one, and then we have your, what they call the throat sounds. Is that getting off your screen? Nope, you can see it. So, for example, in the back of the throat. That's a picture of your throat. If you say, like, I am going running. It's the sound at the end of running is this sound. And so these are your basic sounds that you make without blowing any air. So, s, and Now, if you add a little bit of air, you just don't put your lips together, but put a little air through it, you get, for example, you take this M sound and you add a little bit of air. So we'll call this a stop. We'll just, yeah. So if I say but then I stop it, it becomes b. And so in order to make this, let's make our M sound. And then we'll just add a little to show that you're making a stop. Okay, so we'll just add a little bit. Now that's pretty strangely looking. We'll draw it a little better. So, and this is the. Your same basic structure of the mouth, but now you're doing a stop. You're not letting the sound flow, you're stopping it. Okay. If you do the same with the tongue sound, we'll add a little line to say that it's a stop, and this becomes becomes d. Notice the same position of the tongue. D. Except this time it's stopped. And then we can do the same thing with the S. And you can guess it, we add a line. So now instead of being S, it becomes Ch. So you could, this one, we will consider this one to be J. Now for those of you who actually speak Korean, we'll have a little caveat off to the side. This is a very simplistic method. If you really want to learn Korean, the Korean orthography and how you write this out, come out for like the Korean history class if we ever do it again, and we'll actually teach you how to read it for real. This is just kind of for fun, to give you an idea of the brilliance that King Sejong came up with. Okay, so we'll call this one a J. And now the cheek sound, it is a stopped sound. You say G. And you notice that it's coming from the sides. Your tongue does the opposite of the N. And so this is a cheek sound, G. And then there is no stopped sound for the throat, so we'll leave that one blank. So we have now lip sound stopped lip sound b, d, s, j, and g. Now instead of just stopping, blow a little bit. So you have b, you add a little air, it becomes, okay, experiment before I tell you. Well, actually, you probably looked at your notes and so you know what's coming up. But if you have a b and you add air, it becomes p. So this is an aspirated stop. And so we'll add another line to show that it's aspirated. So we've got one line to show that it's a stop. We'll add another line to show that that little line represents the air coming out. And so in this case, we'll add the lines this way. So we have two lines, and we still have that basic square. And so this is b. So b, p. And then we'll do the same thing, d, and then you add a bit of air coming out, and you get t. So here we have our basic sound. We have s, j, ch. Okay. And, or you could write it sometimes like this. Actually, this is the way it's written on your notes. So you have it coming up above like that. Okay. And then from our g, you add a little air, k. All right, now this one is a little trickier. You have the closed throat sound. You have running. And trying to think of where in English we don't really start a sound, but there's a lot of languages that do have NG at the front. So had a fellow in a few years ago at BFA whose name was Ngoma. So you started with this sound at the beginning. All right, so if you add the stopped aspirant to that, then you get, so you have two lines, or as it shows on your notes, you can write it this way. This is, you're just letting the air out through your closed throat. And that is, for the most part, all of the letters. Well, not really. There's one more that is a tricky letter. And so if you go along to the tongue sounds, and now we have to add another line, because you can do what's called a liquid sound, where you have d stopped, t is aspirated, t. But if you make this, use the same tongue formation, you can make so now you have three lines, and this becomes either L or R, because there is no difference between them in Korean. So you have basically, so you could use this just to say things in English, as we're gonna play a little bit with this, and so we could use this either for saying run or look. Okay, yeah, in English they're very different sounds, but in the East Asian languages usually not. So there you have the basic Korean consonants. There are a fairly limited number. All right, so those of you who don't know Korean, stop listening right now, because I have a secret message for those of you who actually do know Korean. So for those of you who actually already know Korean, this is a pretty simplistic version. We're skipping a few things. We're not talking about final sounds. Okay, the only T that we will use when we're practicing playing with English is T. Okay, so we're not gonna have this as a final T sound. We're not gonna have this as a final T. We're not gonna do any of the final T's. We're gonna say do this no matter where it is. So don't get all hung up that, well, yeah, suit when you do it at the end of a sentence comes, or in a syllable, is a T sound. Okay, forget that. We're going to keep it really simple. We're also not doing doubled consonants. There are doubled consonants. So, for example, you can double the K, you can double the S. Okay, we're not going to worry about that. As we practice with this in English, English has consonant blends. So we have words like straight. We have 3 consonants in a row. Korean doesn't have that. We're going to pretend that we can still use 3 consonants in a row. And finally, we can end with a consonant. So I know that is like in Korean speaking and writing, you can't say straight, you'd have to say straight. Okay, but we're not going to end with a vowel. You can end our syllables with a consonant. Okay, all the rest of you can come back now. So we are now going to play with this a little bit. All you need to know is basically this. Okay? The rest that we're going to do now is things that will make it possible for you to actually play with this. Look at the vowel sheet. Okay, so this is the vowels. In any language, the vowels are the hardest to learn. This is the thing that gives you an accent. If you can speak your vowels the way the native people do, then it will sound like a native. If you speak your vowels otherwise, that's what gives you the accent. These, pretty much every language, B sounds B. And V sounds V. D sounds D. So the consonants are not what will give you your accent. It's when you start making your vowels a little different. Them consonants are still the same, but those vowels, they get kind of strange, and then you'll be able to tell that you got an accent. So we're not going to worry about this. This is freshman history class. It's not a linguistics course. So we're going to use this as a cheat sheet, and we're going to practice the Korean consonants writing English words. So let me basically say how we're going to do this. Okay, so this here, I expect you to memorize. It's simple. You have 5 basic sounds, and you have 3 aspirants are added, and then you have the funky L. So how do you actually put these letters into a sentence? So there have been some movements that have pretty much died out that said we need to write Korean just like we write Italian or German or English. You just put the letters in a straight row. And there were some books printed like in the 1960s that way, and people began to say, no, that just looks weird. Because under the influence of China, and basically having had Chinese and a bit of Japanese as the only source that they knew of, because King Sejong and his Hall of Worthies, when they invented this, they didn't know English. And so they were coming up this all off the top of your head. And in Chinese, the words are written as a block. And so each block is a word. And in Korean, they said, well, that doesn't really work, but we could do every syllable as a block. And so for those of you who are not entirely up on your English orthography and speaking and such, a syllable is 1 block of sounds. So the word straight that we had written here is 1 syllable. I is 1 syllable. Discombobulate. How many syllables? Discombobulate. 5 syllables. So in Korean, that would be written out as 5 different blocks of letters. So to get an idea of this, okay, let me show you with an English word. So if we were to write this in syllables, now unfortunately I can't get any ideas from you guys, so we'll think of a few here. So here's a sentence written in the way you do it. We are learning by video. Okay, so syllables. This is 1 syllable. We are learning by video. E, O. And so there you have a 3-syllable word, a 2-syllable word, the other are 1 syllables. And in Korean, they would arrange these that each syllable would be 1 block. So you would have a break between learn and ing, and between vid and e and o. Now, if you look at this sheet of paper, so this explains how the Koreans put the letters together. And we'll get to this. I'm going to show you starting just with the English bits, because I don't want the fact that we're using English to throw you off too much. So these are not the sounds that we say. These are the letters that we use. Let's put this into phonetics. Okay, this means we're only thinking about the sounds. So if you have we, okay, so again, that's just basically we, but you could put it this way. And then you don't say the E. We are learning. Oh, here's a tricky one. This is actually 2 sounds. Okay, by. Okay. Even the letter I is 2 sounds. I put together. Okay, so we are learning by, vid, e, o. Okay, so never say a silent E. You don't have to worry about writing that. And we're going to do this in this funky little practice manner. So these are what our syllables would be. So let's look at these Korean things. And I believe that this page right here at the very bottom gives you some English sentences that are written in Hangul letters. These are letters, so you can do that with English. Just like I could write English in Greek letters, which I did during university to keep myself interested during when I was taking my notes. But, so this one says, how are you? Okay, how is 2 syllables, so they put that as 2 things. But now, how you arrange the Korean letters. So follow along on this. It's actually not that difficult. If you look at the vowels, today in modern Korean there are 2 types of vowels. There are earthly vowels, which are horizontal. And there are heavenly vowels, which are vertical. Okay, there used to be other vowels that were in the middle, but the people realized, hey, we don't need them, so why should we teach them? So there used to be like this. Okay, but they've done away with that and said, no, we only basically need these vowel sounds. You have the earthly vowels and heavenly vowels. Now, a vowel, you cannot look at the shape of the mouth and just say, oh, look, your tongue does this, your mouth, let's draw a shape of what your tongue does. Okay, these are arbitrary. So that's why we're not going to worry about having to memorize them. You can use a cheat sheet. But, so this is the sound E. And you notice on your thing. This is sound O. And if you're going to build your syllable around these, you have to make sure that you'll build it around it differently for this one than for this one. So, in the example they give here, we'll start with, on the far left, are these vertical or heavenly vowels. And so, they show the word ki. That one's simple. Okay. You have 1 block. This is a vertical vowel, and you're using 1 syllable. So it's just doop, doop, doop. And you would pronounce that ki. Now let's say you want to use the word kim, like as in kimchi. So how are you going to fit that in? You would, this one be a little shorter. You write your ki, and then you put an M. And you read it in this direction. So you have gim. And then if you have 2 at the bottom, so what would be, let's think of an English word that we could do this to. Let's see. Kick. So we'll put, nope, that would be kick. Because that only has one sound at the bottom. Oh, let's do the word cast if you were fishing and you wanted to cast something. Okay, so in English, you would spell it cast, or you put your foot in a cast. But this is a K sound, so we'll put K. And then we'll put the A sound, okay, which if you look down, bottom of the left, okay, so ka is sort of like this. And then we'll put an S sound, and then we'll put a T sound. And so this is the English word cast. Cast. If you have horizontal letters, horizontal vowels, okay. And so on here you've got the basic vowels are all on this little, okay, so it's the only amount of the basic vowels. If you have the horizontal ones, then you build things differently. So they are in the middle chart of your brightly colored one. So if you have a horizontal vowel, the first letter will go there, second letter there. Where do you think the third letter goes? Okay, it would go at the bottom. Okay, so that's relatively simple. If you have 2 at the bottom, you put 2 at the bottom. Okay. Then if you use these ones at the side, I should say there are 2 letters in English that we call semivowels, which can sometimes be used as a vowel, sometimes used as a consonant. They are Y and W. They are sort of consonants, they are sort of vowels. How are you? Not really consonant. We went, not really consonant, but not really vowel. And Korean treats these as an addition to your vowel. So, y, same idea, you're putting a little air, so you just add a stripe of air to your vowel. So this column here is if you want to say the letters with the stripe of air, meaning the y. So if you want to say, for example, the word yo. Yeah, you gotta have this. We'll get there eventually, but that's just the word yo. How are you doing? Okay. So you have the sound O, and you add another bit of air, and it becomes yo. To add the sound w, you have these various ones over here, and they are both horizontal and vertical, in which case you build them like you would these over here. Now, one little rule is that you cannot have a vowel starting a sentence. So let's use the word apple. So, I want you first, using your sheets, the vowel sheet, your consonant sheet, write up the word apple. Try writing it out in Korean letters. First, think of what it is phonetically. going to do it off to the side here where you can't see. All right, hopefully you have it. So the first syllable is a or ap, either one, whichever way you decide to split it. So find here, which of these is most like the word a? And remember, okay, so you could either have pan, or if you're good Brit and you're eating an apple, you'd have father. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one, but we'll choose this one here for pan. Okay, so here's my a, and we'll say ap, because if technically you're supposed to split the syllable between the two double letters, and then I want a p. So ap. So now I have to put a p here. How am I going to fit that in there? Okay, so if we look at our charts, I have too many here. There it is. Okay, if you look at your charts, okay, it's supposed to go this way. And so, but something's missing. So if a syllable starts with a vowel, you have to have this, which is normally NG, but when it comes at the beginning, it's kind of like this at the end. It's silent. It's a placeholder that says, actually not saying anything there, so you can start with this. So ap, and then pull. Okay, so now you look and find which vowel you want to use for the Now, for those of you who are from SIL families or whatever, you might have heard of a schwa sound, which is everywhere in English, and it's just this really lazy vowel that a lot of other languages don't have. Butter, come, okay, things like that. And so whenever you have a schwa sound, you're just going to have to fudge it. So if we go apple, let's just go with the basic, we'll say apple with rude. So we'll make this one, because then we get to use the other, okay? So we need a P sound, and then we need the L sound. Now this is badly written. Now, ap, pull. You see how that works. And you can do this with pretty much any English word. And if we want to do apples, okay, remember we're doing English, not Korean. Apples. And you can then just put the S on it. Okay, so we're going to come back to this tomorrow, and we're actually going to play with this a little bit. It won't be like a summative assignment, but I'm going to have you writing secret notes to each other in English using these letters. So this is just kind of a fun thing to do, to play with these letters. It is simply the most brilliant alphabet in the world. You could teach a person, okay, we've spent 20 minutes, and you could have a basic idea of this. If I were to say, all right, guys, we're now going to send you all spies into Korea, and I sat you down for a day, at the end of one day, you could be reading Korean. You'd have no clue what you're saying. But it is the simplest alphabet there is to learn in the world. Okay? Each letter makes a sound. That sound is based on what the letter looks like. And so nothing like English or German or French or these ridiculous ones where you try to squish sounds that don't really exist onto letters. This is a brilliant alphabet system.